This video was requested from someone who wanted to know the step-by-step onboarding process for a client. They're just starting out with their medical billing business and they wanted to know what are the steps. So I decided that this would be a good video to do. We're going to talk about one client who you get from the being a lead, just not being hired, just being a lead, to invoicing that client. Now, as a disclaimer, the onboarding process looks different for everyone. This is just my basic onboarding process, and sometimes it even looks different for me. Sometimes, depending on what the client wants and other factors, I might do it a little different, switch it up. But I'm just going to go through the basic onboarding process. Now, there's going to be 2 videos. There are 6 parts, and the 6 parts are the pre-provider consultation, the provider consultation, the hiring/onboarding process, setup and training, beginning work, and the normal routine. So today's video, we're going to talk about pre-provider consultation, the provider consultation, and the hiring/onboarding process. So when I talk about the pre-provider consultation, this is going to be where you get the provider to find out about your business or want to talk to you and have a consultation. So whether that is through your marketing, or maybe a friend told that provider about your services, or you met this provider somewhere networking and they decided that they want to learn more about your services. This is that basic, it's basically like a lead. It's where you get your leads from, whether through marketing or wherever else. Mainly, I get my leads through word of mouth. Sometimes the providers might call me if they saw a flyer or something. I don't do many ads, but if they saw a flyer or they saw my business card or someone told them about me, they would give me a call. So this is where I get my leads from. You will have leads or ways that the provider learn about your business. So my first thing is to have them schedule a consultation. I used to talk to the providers on the phone one time when they call me about my services, but I don't like to do that because I don't feel prepared. I don't feel like I know much about them. I can't do my research. I don't know what their specialty is until right then. I like to be prepared. So even if a provider calls me on the phone, I will let them know that they have to schedule a consultation with me. I'll give them my link and they will do that. We'll schedule something, even if it's the next day or whenever I have a free time, I will do that. I've also realized that, your time is precious. So if a provider just ups and calls you and you were doing something, you're in between something, you're kind of not focused, your mind is all over the place. So scheduling a meeting with them is my suggestion to you, that you should do that. So you can use any system like Calendly. I think there's other ones. I don't use any of those. I actually use Wix. My website is through Wix, so there's a scheduler through Wix, and I use that scheduler. It's pretty easy. I just set the times that I am available, and they can choose those specific times. I have my provider consultations on 2 specific days at certain times because, other days I'm doing other things. So I don't want to just have them, every day during the week all the time. So I have them set at certain times. So regardless of if the provider is local to me in the Virgin Islands or they are away, I usually have a Zoom meeting with them. I used to do, like I said, just telephone conversations, or I might meet with a provider. But again, I have to make sure that I use my time wisely, and the best way for me, or the most efficient way for me, is to do it by Zoom. So whether or not the provider is here locally or not, I do all of my provider consultations by Zoom. Now with those Zoom provider consultations, the provider doesn't always have to put on their camera. Actually, the last consultation that I had, the provider didn't put on their camera, but I always make sure I put on my camera because I want to make sure that they feel comfortable with me. They know who I am. They know that I'm a real person. I'm not just, AI or no robot, because they are trying to trust me with their money, with their revenue. I want them to see me, see my face, and see how passionate I am about their billing. So even if they don't have on their camera, I always put on my camera. When the providers actually schedule the consultations, they do have a little pre-questionnaire that they have to fill out before. It's not long. I think it's like 5 questions. What's the name of your practice? What specialty do you have? How did you hear about me and my services? What are you looking for? Basic questions. And like I said, I think it's about 5 basic questions that I asked them. Nothing too long. I just wanted to kind of feel them out, see where they are. So for example, one of the last providers that I spoke with wanted eligibility as one of the things they wanted me to do. And at first I was like, maybe I should just contact them, since they set up a meeting in advance, so they filled out that form and they set it up for, let's say, Friday, and it's a Monday. And I thought to myself, let me contact them, because I have their email now, I have their phone number. Let me contact them and let them know that eligibility is not something that I do. However, they also wanted something else. And so I decided not to do that. But let's say, just in case it was just straight eligibility, there was nothing else that they wanted, or, I couldn't do eligibility, whatever the situation was, then it would be that time that I would write them back, email them, call them, let them know that those are services that I don't provide. So I wouldn't waste their time and they won't waste my time. So that's why the pre-questionnaire is kind of there, so I can kind of figure out, what's going on, what they need, all of that stuff. But like I said, I continue on with that provider because there was more that the provider wanted, and I'm actually glad that I did, because it was something that I can actually help them with. Now, after I've decided that, the pre-questionnaires and all of that stuff is okay and straight, we go into the provider consultation. So right before the provider consultation, so if the provider consultation is scheduled on a Friday, let's say maybe the Wednesday or the Thursday, I would send them a longer questionnaire. Now, in this questionnaire, I think it has about 15 to 20 questions. And this is just for me, again, to feel out the provider, see what they want, prepare myself in advance. Again, when you have these provider consultations, you want to be prepared. You want to do your research if you can do that. If you have the name of the provider, of the practice, you can kind of Google them, see what they're into, if it's something that you're interested in doing. You also want to see what they wrote, the responses that they have on these questions, so that you can know, again, whether you can handle this, what questions you should ask more of. So if you asked how much is your revenue for the month and they say $2 million, you might say, well, do you get all that $2 million through claims, or do you get it through this, or do you get it? Like, you might have follow-up questions to ask, but because you were prepared and you already had a lot of information already, then you would be able to ask them these questions and not waste too much time. And they would have the numbers for you. Because when you ask providers in the meeting itself about these numbers, sometimes they can't just pull it up right then. They might not know the numbers. You might ask them, how many claims do you send out? And they say 10 claims when they actually send out 20. But when you ask it in advance and you give them a chance to look for that information, then you can get more accurate information so that you can work better with that. Now, I did do a video letting you know some of the questions that you should ask these providers during the consultation, so I will link that above. But the questions are not, definite set questions. Like the questions that I have in that video, you don't have to ask those per se, but you should ask questions that will help you understand the provider's needs more, and if you can meet those needs, and if you offer the services that they're wanting. So for the most part, you're asked about stuff like, how many claims do you send out, your revenue, what's your AR. You ask certain questions so that you can know where you can go with that. Then, like I said, after asking those questions that's already on the form, they should send that back to you before the provider's meeting, which you'll let them know in the email that you sent them. So during the provider's consult, you will go over the answers to those questions just to make sure that they are correct, they are what the provider wants them to be, and then you most likely will have follow-up questions. So don't just use those questions that you have and just stick with those and not ask anything else. You might ask that question that's on the form or confirm what they have written, and then that might bring up another question, and then that might bring up another question. So you want to make sure that you have like the basic questions that you need, but you will also have other questions that you probably won't know you have until you are in the consultation with the provider. That is why it is very, very important to listen to what the provider says. You don't want to keep talking about, oh, I do this, oh, I do that, oh, I. You want to hear what the provider needs. What is the provider's pain points? What are they looking for? Why are they coming to you? You want to make sure that you listen so that you can know how to respond and what additional questions you need to ask. I also record these consultations. I let the provider know that I am recording so that I can make sure that I don't miss anything. And when it's time to send them information about the proposal and how much it will cost, that I make sure I don't miss anything that they need me to do. So recording it helps me in doing that, because sometimes you try and write down and listen at the same time and you miss stuff. So I don't want to miss stuff. I want to make sure that I understand all of their needs, and that is why I would record these sessions. Now, this consultation is not just for you to try and get them to use your services. You're basically interviewing them and they are interviewing you. So it's not a one-sided thing. They're not just interviewing you and, you have to be nervous and you have to, oh my God, I hope I get it. No, you're both kind of like interviewing each other so that you can see if you are a good fit for each other. You might think you are a good fit for them and they might not think they're a good fit for you, or vice versa. So this is your opportunity to feel them out. That's why I also like video. You can look at someone, you can feel them out. They might be saying one thing with their mouths, but their body language is showing you something else, and that might not be a good fit for you or a red flag. So you want to use these consultations to your advantage. Now, I don't give definite pricing in these consultations. I do have minimums, and I would tell a provider about my minimums. So if a provider asks, how much is this going to be? How much it is to do your full revenue cycle. So if I kind of should by now already know what they need, what they're looking for, I might say something like, depending on what you told me, you fall in the range of my clients that spend between $1,500 and $1,800. However, I'm going to have to go over it, make sure that, I know what your needs are, and I can send you a proposal and let you know how much it's going to be specifically for you. So I am giving them a range of how much it's going to be, but I'm not giving them a definite price right then and right there, because I still don't have enough information to actually tell them how much it is right then and there. I know some people say, oh, you want them to sign as soon as possible, you don't want to have to follow up with them, but I personally don't feel that way, because if I am not a right fit for them, or they are not a right fit for me, or they're rushing, either one of us is rushing, it can be bad in the long run, and I don't want to have to deal with that. So I do kind of give them a amount. So when it comes to minimums for me, there is a certain amount that I just won't take lower than. Now, different providers want you to do different things, and if you just want me to send, 2 claims, 5 claims a month, and my minimum is $850, that might not be worth it to the provider, and they might not want to do it, which is fine. But I'm not going to lower my price lower than my minimum, because I know what it has to take for me to do certain things and what's worth my time in doing. And so I make sure that I also have my minimums, and I let them know that as well. Now, the last thing that I had started to do, and it has been going well so far, is asking for access to the provider's practice management system. I started to do this because the provider would tell me certain things about their, AR, denial, how much claims they sent. And then when I actually get in the system, I realized that the numbers are completely off. And so I started to ask about getting access to the practice management system in advance before we actually sign a contract, so that I can see what's going on and I can give them a better proposal quote. Now, when I do that, I have them sign a business associate agreement. And this is because I am going to be looking at their PHI, and I want them to know that I'm going to keep it secure. This is nothing that I'm going to, leak. I still am responsible for keeping the PHI, the information secure. So I signed a business associate agreement. That would also make them feel comfortable that I know what I'm doing, and that I'm not going to be leaking their information for their patients, and that, everything is going to be secure. I know how to handle that type of information. So I signed a BAA, which is a business associate agreement, and then I go and I look through their system. Now, depending on what they want me to do, I might not have to do that in advance, but I've been learning that, especially if a provider wants me to do the full revenue cycle, which is from claim submission to patient statements, then I tend to ask them to give me access before I actually quote them for my services. And then there's the hiring and the onboarding process. So now let's say we've gone through the pre-consultation, we've gone through the consultation and all of that, and both of us have decided that we're a good fit for each other and that we want to work with each other. Then is when I will send the documentation. So if I haven't sent the documentations already, if I haven't sent the BAA, I will send the BAA, Business Associate Agreement, the billing agreement, and the provider practice form. Now, of course, we went over what the BAA is. Then the billing agreement will have what's my scope of work, what I will do and won't do, what I'm responsible for, what the client is responsible for, which package that they are taking, because I do have different packages, how much it's going to cost, when they should pay. All of that is in my contract, and I actually have a video talking about some must-haves that you should have in your contract. So you can watch that video after you watch this one. And you want to make sure certain things are in your contract. And so I have them sign the contract, and then I have them fill out a practice provider form. This form is just the basic information. So it'll have on, the provider's name, the practice name, the address, telephone numbers, NPI numbers, tax ID numbers, P10s, all of those things. Because you never know what you're going to need when it comes to billing, but you just want to make sure you have all of that information in one place. I don't want to have to be asking them, oh, and what's your telephone number? Oh, and what's your address? Oh, and what's your tax ID number? I just ask them for all of that one time after we have decided to work together. Now, I send these forms through something called Dubsado. I've been using Dubsado for probably like 2 years. I think I've been using it for about 2 years, and I really like it. You can send your forms through Dubsado, and you and the provider can sign electronically. The provider gets a copy, you get a copy, you have it stored there. I also print out my contracts and my BAAs so that I can have them physically, but that's me. I have a problem with that. But it also stores it for you, and it helps because you don't have to worry about sending them the contract, them printing it out, then scanning it back, then, doing all of that. It works where they can review it, look at it, send it back to you. You sign it, they sign it, everything's great. The price I spend for Dubsado, I believe, is around $150 to $200 a year, and I think it's worth it because I also use it for my credentialing agreements, and I'm going to be using it for my bookkeeping service agreement when I actually add that service as well. So it's going to be useful, and I think for that amount, it's not bad. So I use Dubsado. I know there are other ones out there, but I've never used any of those other ones. I just have used Dubsado. Then I send them an invoice. And the invoice could be for a setup fee if I have to do that, but it definitely would be for the billing services. Now, I have switched the way I charge or the way I bill for the billing services. So before I used to charge for, let's say, September on October 1st. However, I don't do that anymore. Now what I do is charge for, let's say, the month of October at the beginning of October. So you're paying for that month's billing services. I've been doing that now for a while, but I still have some clients that I have on the old way where they pay for, let's say, September and October. But anyone coming from this point on will be doing it that way because I don't want to have to be doing billing for a long period of time and not getting paid. Now, I don't charge by percentage, so it would kind of be hard to do that way of billing if I was charging by percentage because I would have to wait till the month of September ended to calculate how much you would owe me for September. But I charge a flat rate fee, and if you don't know what a flat rate fee is, I will link that video letting you know about the different ways that you can charge, flat rate being one. But I usually charge flat rate. So if for some reason I didn't charge a provider flat rate and I charged them a percentage or let's say hourly, then I would have to charge them for the month before. But because I charge a flat rate, I'm charging them for the month that's coming up. So don't forget to download my free 12-step checklist that'll tell you how to start a medical billing business with confidence. All you have to do is put in your name and your email address and it'll be sent straight to you and you can get started on how to start your medical billing business. Stay tuned for part 2 where we're going to go over the setup and training, the beginning work, and the normal routine. I'll see you in the next video.